If you could schedule your next power outage, would you schedule it for 70 degrees, blue skies, daytime, no dangers around, no problems or threats lurking around the corner? Of course you would. Can you schedule your next power outage? Can you determine how long it will last? Of course you can't.
Your power will go out at some point in time. It may be in the middle of winter. It may be at night. The temperature might be 0 or below. It might not be overnight. It may be a long time. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to fix meals for your family safely indoors during times like these? My name is Les, and I want to welcome you to the Cheffprepper channel. And in this video, I want to show you a way to plan for a solution that will let you and your family cook safely indoors during those power outages, short-term or long-term. It's very simple, very basic, no complications, no secret formulas, and it's the way that our family went about making our plans and decisions. And we want to help you and your family to be able to do the same. And at the end of the video, I'll show you my personal favorite stove and fuel combination for cooking safely indoors during power outages. I recently did a video in which I put together the bare minimums for a safe to use indoor grid down kitchen that costs less than $20. You can see it in this video. And you can see the items from that $20 kitchen being used to cook meals in the second video of this series here. And now I want to walk through our kitchen with you, offering some suggestions for how to replace or find alternative means of using some of your kitchen items in a grid down situation. I also have a question that I'd like to ask you guys at the end of the video. So since we're probably going to be dealing with open flames rather than our electric cook stove, we need to talk first about being safe. Two things that you got to have. One is a fire extinguisher. In grid down situations, you're going to be dealing with open flames more than likely, so you got to have one of these. And it needs to be in a place where it's easily accessible. Everyone knows where it is. Everybody knows how to use it. The second absolute necessity is a carbon monoxide detector. You're going to be using stoves that may be questionable about whether they're safe to use indoors or not. And it needs to be one that gives you a readout, not just an alarm yes or no. This one will tell me if I have carbon monoxide being released long before it ever gets to the level of being dangerous. This is the kind you need. It doesn't have to be this brand, but one that will perform that way. And the last thing, but not necessarily the least, is a first aid kit. This one's for the kitchen, focusing on burns and cuts primarily. Somewhere near where you're going to be using these potentially questionable stoves, you have a window or a way to get some ventilation. And so to replace this stove, you're going to need a primary stove and fuel combination. Now I suggest that you have a secondary stove and fuel combination. You can check this video out to see several of those type stoves and fuels being used. And we also have several other videos like these, in which you can see several different stove and fuel combinations that are safe to use indoors. That is, of course, if you have those safety components. And if you choose propane or butane as your primary fuel, not all stoves that use those two fuels are safe to use indoors. So you got to do your research, make sure that your stove is usable indoors as well as outdoors. If the power outage is a long-term scenario, you won't always be cooking indoors. You can still cook outdoor. So you might want to have a primary and secondary way of cooking outside also. We have several videos showing different outdoor stoves and fuels. And in our kitchen, going from the stove, we come to the refrigerator. And of course, when the power goes out, you're going to want to fix the foods in there ASAP. And since you now have your primary stove and fuel combination, you can get started on that right away when the power goes out. But more than likely, you won't be able to cook everything you have in here right away. If the power's out for very long, you got the chance of some of that food going bad. So what to do? Well, one option is to have a cooler and to have a deep freezer or a chest freezer. Yes, that one looks pretty rough, but it still works. And in there, you would keep one of the larger bags of ice. so that when the power goes out, get your ice out of there, put it in here, take the food out of your fridge, put it in there. That won't keep it good for months on end, but it will keep it good for several days. The next area in our kitchen has to do with water. Water is going to be very important during a grid down situation or power outage. And when you experience a power outage, if it's very long term, you may have boil water advisories, or you may not have any water at all, if you're on public water, that is. So I suggest that you have a supply of bottled water on hand, and also suggest that you have some kind of non-electrical powered, gravity fed water filter. And that's important for your overall SHTF preps, power outage preps, and preps of all kinds. And since you got one of these stoves or something similar, you can deal with the boil water advisories as well. If you don't have a gravity fed water filter, and if you run out of your bottled water, you're still going to need drinking water. And maybe you don't want to use up the fuel that you have for your stove. You can make safe drinking water using household bleach. Now, this video isn't about how to do that, but we do have a video coming out about using bleach, pool shock, and various other ways to make safe drinking water. So you know the routine if you don't want to miss that video. And moving on from the water filter in our kitchen brings us to the coffee. And so when the power goes out, the electric coffee maker is not going to work. And if you're a person like me, that's a big problem. We like coffee. So what will we do? So if we've made good plans, we have a safe to use stove, we can still use our ground coffee, and we can make it in a French press. You've seen this used in several videos making coffee. We also can use a percolator. That one's been used quite a bit, you can tell. If you use coffee beans, your coffee bean grinder is not going to work, so you'll need to get yourself a hand cranked coffee bean grinder. As long as you can heat water, you can have instant coffee. And if you don't want to use your fuel for making coffee, as a last resort, and I mean a last resort, there's always something like this. I call these coffee pills, and I did a video about these that you can see here if you're interested in coffee pills. And of course, I guess the last resort would be to do without. And moving on from our coffee area brings us to some of the storage shelves. Those shelves are not stocked with the things that we would be fixing in a grid down situation. They're primarily stocked now with single ingredients from scratch recipe. But now let's talk about the foods that you might want to have on hand for grid down cooking times. The easiest foods to cook during power outages and grid down times would be foods that don't require any cooking. Peanuts, peanut butter, sardines, chicken spread, chicken salad, and if you have a dehydrator like this, you can do things like Mrs. Cheffprepper did, making dehydrated apples and various other things. If you like the idea of no cook foods, we have an entire video. No power, no fuel, no problem. Next in the order of difficulty, if you want to think of it that way, would be heat and eat foods. And it might be a good idea to have on hand complete meals in a can rather than just individual ingredients. And if one pot meal types of canned food interest you, we got a video about that as well. Going up the level of difficulty a little bit, you have things like the Indoor products and similar products that do require a little bit of cooking. You can easily combine things like that with canned chicken. And if you'd like to know why I have Sam's chicken sitting out here, or if you buy canned chicken for any reason, you really need to watch this video. And when it comes to canned foods, some of them are going to have pull tabs and some of them are not. And in a grid down situation, your electric can opener, should you have one, is not going to work. Those are called P38 can openers. Very small, they're very effective, they work really well. And can openers like these, they break all the time. So I would suggest that for your grid down kitchen, indoor or outdoor, that you have a couple or three of the P38 type can openers. And when it comes to keeping things organized, neat, and sanitary, you might want to consider having just a few of these things on hand. A couple or three extra garbage bags, or the little Walmart type bags, a few extra paper towels or napkins, disinfecting wipes, and always good is to have some bleach on hand. And so that you can keep things like that and those up here and clean, rather than over here dealing with them, Plates, bowls, spoons, forks, and knives will make life a lot easier during such times, a lot more convenient, and less stressful. And the last thing is lights. At nighttime, you're not going to be able to see unless you got some source of light. These are battery operated candles of all sizes, shapes, flavors. That's a 100-hour candle, and that is a power station. And if you have one of those, it can give you a lot more options than what we've talked about in this video. And in an upcoming video, we're going to talk about how one of those can give you a lot more options. And at the end of the video, I'll show you my personal favorite stove and fuel combination. And my favorite stove and fuel combination for power outage cooking safely indoors is a butane stove and fuel. The butane stove will let you do nearly anything that you could do on your regular stovetop. And now the question that I had for you guys at the end of the video: what did I leave out, or what would you add in your plans for a safe, grid down indoor kitchen? Let us know in the comments below.